The ocean was very quiet that night. He-Jin stood on the deck of her small research boat, looking at the dark water below. The gentle waves made soft sounds against the boat's side. She had been studying the sea around this small island for 3 months now, but tonight was different. Tonight, the water was glowing. He-Jin pulled her warm jacket closer and picked up her special camera. Through its lens, she could see that the blue-green light in the water wasn't random. It made patterns, like stars in the sky. But these patterns changed in ways that made no sense to her scientific mind. "This isn't normal," she said softly to herself. In all her years of studying sea life, she had never seen anything like this. The light moved in perfect circles and squares, then formed numbers and shapes that seemed almost like writing. He-Jin wrote everything down in her notebook. The sea temperature was normal. The weather was calm. There was nothing special about tonight, except for these strange lights. She took water samples in small glass bottles, carefully marking each one with the time and place. Just then, she saw another boat approaching. It was small and white, with lots of electronic equipment on top. As it came closer, He-Jin could see a woman standing at the front, holding something that looked like a compass, but much more complex. The woman waved, and He-Jin waved back. Soon, the other boat was close enough to talk. "Hello," the woman called out. "I'm Jae-yun from the Environmental Protection Office. Are you seeing the lights too?" He-Jin nodded. "Yes, I'm He-Jin, a marine biologist. I've been studying this area for months, but I've never seen anything like this before." Jae-yun's boat came alongside He-Jin's. The strange equipment on Jae-yun's boat was making soft beeping sounds. Jae-yun looked worried as she checked the readings on her screens. "These patterns," He-Jin said, showing Jae-yun her notebook. "They're not random. See how they repeat every 12 minutes. And look at this sequence of shapes. It's like mathematics, but not any math I know." Jae-yun looked at the notebook, then at her own equipment. Her face became serious. "You're right. This isn't random. And it's not natural either." Just then, both women noticed something strange. The glowing patterns in the water started moving faster. They spread out in all directions, making a huge circle around both boats. The light grew brighter and brighter, until the whole sea looked like it was on fire with blue flames. He-Jin's scientific equipment started giving strange readings. Her computer showed numbers that made no sense. The water temperature hadn't changed, but somehow the light was getting stronger. "We need to record this," He-Jin said, reaching for her camera again. But when she tried to take pictures, the camera wouldn't work. None of her electronic devices would turn on. Jae-yun checked her equipment too. Everything was dead. Even their boat's engines wouldn't start. They were floating in a circle of mysterious light, with no power and no way to call for help. In the distance, they could see the dark shape of the island. Local people called it Ariel's Island, though no one seemed to know why. Now, as He-Jin and Jae-yun watched, a thin line of the same blue-green light appeared on the island's beach, like a door opening in the darkness. "He-Jin," Jae-yun said quietly, "I think we need to talk. There's something you should know about this island, something that isn't in any scientific books." The light in the water pulsed once more, and both women felt their boats start to move. Slowly but surely they were being pulled toward the glowing line on the beach. The night was still quiet, but now it felt like the quiet before something big was about to happen. He-Jin held tight to the side of her boat. Her scientific mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. But deep down, she knew that tonight, science alone wouldn't be enough to explain what was happening in these mysterious waters. Dark clouds gathered above He-Jin and Jae-yun's boats. The wind grew stronger, making the waves bigger. Rain started to fall, first in small drops, then in heavy sheets. The glowing water around them grew brighter, as if answering the storm. "This isn't a normal storm," Jae-yun shouted over the wind. She was trying to make her equipment work, but nothing would turn on. The weather report said tonight would be clear. Jin held onto her boat's rail as another wave rocked them. The rain was cold, but the glowing water felt warm, almost alive. Through the rain, she could see that the light on the beach was getting brighter too. Suddenly, both women felt something large move under their boats. The water rippled, making circles much bigger than the storm waves. Jin's scientific mind tried to calculate how big something would need to be to make waves like that. The answer scared her. Look, Jia pointed at the water. Under the surface, a huge shape was moving. It was longer than 3 buses put together, and it glowed with the same blue-green light as the water. Through the clear water, they could see patterns moving across its surface, like the ones they had seen earlier. Jin took out her notebook, but the rain made it impossible to write. She tried to memorize everything she was seeing, even though it went against everything she had learned about marine life. No known sea creature could create light patterns like this. The huge shape moved between their boats, lifting them up on a gentle wave. Both women could now see it clearly. It wasn't a whale, or a shark, or anything they had ever seen before. It looked like it was made of light and water at the same time. Just when the situation seemed most dangerous, they heard the sound of another boat's engine. Through the rain, they saw an old fishing boat approaching. A man stood at its wheel, moving the boat carefully through the rough waves. "Get on, quickly," the man shouted. He brought his boat close to Jin's. "I'm Dugyun. We need to move away from here." Jin looked at Jia, who nodded. They both knew staying on their powerless boats was dangerous. Du-hyun helped them climb onto his fishing boat, which still had working engines. As soon as they were safe on Du-hyun's boat, the huge shape in the water began to sink deeper. The glowing patterns grew dimmer, but didn't disappear completely. The storm started to calm down, almost as quickly as it had started. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Du-hyun asked quietly. He was steering his boat toward the small harbor on the island's far side. "The Guardian is awakening." "The Guardian?" Jin asked. She was still shaking, partly from cold and partly from what she had seen. "What do you mean?" Do-hyun looked at Jia, who nodded slowly. "It's time she knew," Jia said. "Jin, that thing we saw. It's been here for thousands of years. My office doesn't really monitor the environment. We monitor the Guardian." Jin looked back at the water. The glowing patterns were still there, moving in their strange, mathematical way. She had come to this island to study unusual sea life. Instead, she had found something that would change everything she thought she knew about the ocean. "There's a warm place in the harbor where we can talk," Du-hyun said. "You'll need to understand what's happening. The Guardian doesn't show itself to just anyone. If you saw it, that means you're part of this now." As they approached the harbor, the rain stopped completely. The clouds moved away, revealing a sky full of stars. But the lights in the water kept glowing, like a message they were only beginning to understand. Du-hyun's small house sat on the edge of the harbor. Inside, it was warm and dry. Jin wrapped her hands around a cup of hot tea, while Jia spread out some old papers on the wooden table. The papers were yellow with age, and the writing on them was in ancient Korean. "These documents are over 500 years old," Jia explained. She pointed to drawings of the same light patterns they had seen in the water. "Our people have known about the Guardian for a very long time. We call this place Ariel's Island, but that name is new. The old stories use a different name. They call it the Door Between Worlds." Jin looked at the drawings carefully. Even though they were very old, they showed exactly what she had seen in the water. "But what is the Guardian?" she asked. "Why is it here?" Do-hyun sat down with them. "The Guardian protects something very important," he said. "Under this island, there is a place where our world touches another world. The Guardian makes sure these worlds don't mix too much. If they did, both worlds would be in danger." Jia nodded. "That's why my office watches this place. We're not really environmental officers. We're part of a very old group that helps protect the Guardian's secret. The lights you study, Jin, they're actually warnings. The barrier between worlds is getting weaker. Jin tried to understand all this new information. Her scientific mind wanted proof, but she couldn't deny what she had seen in the water. How long has this been happening? She asked. The barrier weakens every 1,000 years, Do-hyun explained. When that happens, the Guardian needs help to make it strong again. The last time was 999 years ago. That means we have 1 year until the barrier needs to be fixed again. Just then, they heard a strange sound from outside. All three went to the window. The harbor water was glowing again, but this time the light was making shapes in the air above the water. The shapes looked like letters from a language none of them had ever seen. The Guardian is trying to tell us something, Jae-yun said. She took out her special equipment, which was working again now. These symbols are new. They've never appeared before. Jin watched the light symbols reflect on the water. They reminded her of the equations she used in her research. Wait, she said suddenly. I think I understand some of this. These patterns, they're similar to the way sea creatures communicate through bioluminescence, but they're much more complex. Do-hyun looked surprised. In all our old stories, no one has ever been able to read the Guardian's messages, he said. Jin, I don't think you found this island by accident. The Guardian must have called you here. The light symbols changed, making new patterns. Jin took out her notebook and started writing quickly. It's like a mathematical language, she said. The Guardian isn't just warning us. It's asking for help. Jae-yun and Do-hyun watched as Jin worked. Outside, the glowing symbols continued to dance above the harbor. The Guardian's message was becoming clear. The old ways of protecting the barrier wouldn't work anymore. The world had changed too much in 1,000 years. They needed to find a new way, one that combined the ancient magic with modern science. As the night grew deeper, the three people sat in Do-hyun's warm house, surrounded by old papers and new equations. They were now part of something much bigger than themselves. The Guardian had chosen them to help save not just one world, but two. The next morning, Do-hyun took Jin and Jae-yun to his family's old storage room. The small building stood behind his house, made of stone and wood that had lasted for generations. Inside, wooden boxes filled with old books and scrolls lined the walls. My family has lived on this island for over 30 generations, Do-hyun said as he opened one of the oldest boxes. Every father tells his son about our duty to the Guardian. Every mother tells her daughter. We keep the records safe. He carefully lifted out a very old book. Its cover was made of dark leather, and golden symbols decorated its spine. When he opened it, the pages were filled with beautiful handwriting and detailed drawings. This is my family's most important book, Do-hyun explained. It tells the story of how my ancestors first met the Guardian. They were fishermen, just like I am now. One night, 1,000 years ago, they saw the same lights we saw yesterday. Jin and Jae-yun sat close as Do-hyun turned the pages. The book showed pictures of people performing a special ceremony on the beach. In the water, a shape much like the one they had seen glowed with bright light. The Guardian chose my ancestors to help protect the barrier, Do-hyun continued. Every 1,000 years, when the barrier gets weak, the Guardian needs human help to make it strong again. The old ceremony uses the power of both worlds to fix it. Jae-yun looked at her modern equipment, then back at the ancient book. But something's different this time, isn't it? That's why the Guardian is showing us new signs. Do-hyun nodded. The world has changed. People don't believe in magic anymore. They believe in science. The old ceremony might not work now. Jin studied the drawings of the ceremony carefully. Look at these patterns they made in the sand, she said. They're similar to the light patterns we saw, but much simpler. It's like an old computer trying to talk to a new one. The basic idea is the same, but the language has changed. Just then, they heard a loud sound from outside. All three rushed to the door. The sky above the island had turned a strange color, like a sunset, but in the wrong colors. The water around the island was glowing again, brighter than ever. "It's starting," Do-hyun said quietly. "The barrier is getting weaker faster than we thought. We don't have a year. We need to find a way to do the ceremony soon." Jin looked at her research notes, then at the old book. "Maybe that's why the Guardian called me here," she said. "I study how sea creatures use light to communicate. If we can understand the Guardian's new messages, maybe we can update the ceremony. We can make it work with today's world." Jae-yun's equipment started making loud beeping sounds. The readings were showing energy levels they had never seen before. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it quickly," she said. "The barrier isn't just weak, it's breaking." Do-hyun carefully put the old book back in its box. "Then we need to work together," he said. "We need the old knowledge from my family's books, Jae-yun's special equipment, and Hae-jin's understanding of sea life and light. The Guardian chose all of us for a reason." As they left the storage room, the strange light in the sky grew stronger. The water around the island pulsed with blue-green light, like a heartbeat getting faster and faster. Time was running out, and they needed to solve this puzzle before it was too late. 3 days had passed since they found the old books. Hae-jin sat in her small laboratory on the island, looking at her computer screen. The numbers made no sense. According to her equipment, the water around the island was both hot and cold at the same time. It was like the normal rules of science had stopped working. Jae-yun walked into the laboratory, carrying her special measuring tools. "The energy readings are getting stronger," she said. "Look at this." She showed Hae-jin a screen full of flashing red numbers. "These readings are 10 times higher than yesterday." Outside the window, the ocean looked strange. The blue-green light never went away now, even in bright daylight. Sometimes, the light formed shapes that looked like doors opening under the water. Through these light doors, they could see shadows of things that didn't belong in their world. "Do-hyun needs to see this," Hae-jin said. She picked up her phone to call him. But before she could, they heard his voice shouting from the beach. Both women ran outside. Do-hyun was standing on the sand, pointing at something amazing. Words were appearing in the sand, burning themselves into the beach like laser writing. The letters weren't in any language they knew, but somehow, they could feel what the words meant. "The Guardian is scared," Hae-jin said quietly. "It's trying to tell us that time is running out." Jae-yun's equipment started making loud noises again. "Look at the water," she shouted. The waves were bringing strange things onto the beach. Objects that looked like they were made of solid light washed up on the sand. They were beautiful but impossible. Shells that glowed from inside, stones that floated in the air, and fish made of crystal that were somehow still alive. Do-hyun picked up one of the glowing shells. "These are from the other world," he said. "The barrier is getting so weak that things are starting to cross over." Hae-jin took careful notes about everything they saw. Her scientific mind was still trying to understand it all. Then she noticed something in her data that made her heart beat faster. "The light patterns," she said, pointing to her notebook. "They're not random. They're getting more complex, like they're building up to something. It's like the Guardian is trying to teach us its language before it's too late." Just then, all of Jae-yun's equipment turned off at once. The air became very still and quiet. Even the waves stopped moving. In the strange silence, they could hear a soft humming sound coming from deep under the island. "It's starting," Do-hyun whispered. "The final awakening. My family's books say this happens just before the barrier breaks completely." The humming grew louder. The water around the island began to move in circles, creating a giant whirlpool. In the center of the whirlpool, the blue-green light grew brighter and brighter. Hae-jin looked at her friends. "We need to work faster," she said. "The Guardian isn't just warning us anymore. It's calling for help. Everything I've learned about sea life and light patterns tells me that this is a distress signal." Jae-yun nodded. "Then we need to answer it. But how do we talk to something so ancient and powerful?" As if in response, more words appeared in the sand. This time, when He-Jin looked at them, she realized she could almost read them. The Guardian was changing its language, trying to meet them halfway. Now they just had to figure out how to answer back before it was too late. The sun was setting when it happened. He-Jin, Jae-Yun, and Do-Hyun stood on the beach, watching the strange lights in the water grow brighter. The humming sound from beneath the island had become stronger, making the ground vibrate under their feet. Suddenly, the water in front of them began to rise. It formed a tall column of glowing liquid that reached toward the darkening sky. Inside the column, they could see something moving. The water fell away slowly, revealing a being of pure light and energy. This was Ariel, the guardian they had heard so much about. But it wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of looking like a traditional sea spirit, it appeared as a shifting form of pure energy. Its body changed shapes as they watched, sometimes looking like a wave, sometimes like a strand of DNA, and sometimes like pure mathematics made visible. "It's beautiful," He-Jin whispered. She had studied sea creatures all her life, but nothing had prepared her for this sight. The Guardian moved closer to the beach. When it spoke, they didn't hear words with their ears. Instead, the words appeared in their minds, accompanied by images and feelings that helped them understand. "Your world has changed," the Guardian's thoughts told them. "The old magic is fading because humans no longer believe in it. But you have created something new, something you call science. This new power has been helping me without you knowing it." Jae-Yun looked at her equipment, understanding now why the readings had been so strange. "Our scientific instruments," she said. "They've been interacting with your energy all this time." The Guardian's light pulsed in agreement. "Every time you study the sea, every time you measure and observe, you strengthen the barrier in new ways. Your understanding of the world helps hold it together. But now, the barrier needs more than just accidental help. It needs purpose and direction." Do-Hyun stepped forward. "The old ceremonies in my family's books," he said. "They won't work anymore, will they?" "No," the Guardian's thoughts replied. "The old magic was based on belief and tradition. The new ceremony must be based on understanding and knowledge. That is why I called you here. Each of you brings something essential." The Guardian turned to each of them in turn. To He-Jin, it showed images of her research into sea life and light patterns. To Jae-Yun, it revealed how her monitoring equipment had been helping maintain the barrier. To Do-Hyun, it showed how his family's dedication had kept the old knowledge safe until it was needed. Together, the Guardian explained, "You can create a new way to strengthen the barrier, one that uses both the wisdom of the past and the knowledge of the present." As they watched, the Guardian began to show them images of what needed to be done. They saw how He-Jin's understanding of bioluminescence could be used to communicate with the other world. They saw how Jae-Yun's equipment could focus and direct the barrier's energy. They saw how Do-Hyun's family traditions could guide them in combining everything together. But the Guardian's light was getting dimmer. Maintaining this form was clearly difficult. "Time grows short," it told them. "The barrier weakens with each passing moment. You must work quickly to create the new ceremony. Both worlds depend on your success." With these words, the Guardian began to sink back into the water. As it disappeared, one final thought reached them. "Trust in your knowledge, but also in each other." The strength of the barrier has always come from both worlds working together. He-Jin worked through the night in her laboratory, studying all her research about sea creatures and light. She now understood why she had been drawn to study bioluminescence. Her whole career had been preparing her for this moment. "I think I found something," she told Jae-Yun and Do-Hyun as the sun rose. "Sea creatures use light not just to communicate, but to change the water around them. If we combine all our knowledge, we might be able to help the Guardian strengthen the barrier." Jae-Yun spread out her equipment on the laboratory table. "My instruments can detect the barrier's energy," she said. "Maybe they can also help direct it, like a lens focusing light." Do-Hyun opened his family's old book. The ancient ceremony used sacred objects placed in a circle, he explained. We could use Jai-Yun's machines the same way. Instead of ritual objects, we'll use scientific instruments. They worked together to create their plan. He-Jin's research showed them how to make patterns of light that the Guardian could understand. Jai-Yun's equipment would amplify these patterns. Du-Hyun's knowledge of the old ceremonies would help them perform everything in the right order. As they prepared, the sky grew darker even though it was morning. The barrier between worlds was getting very weak. Strange lights appeared in the air, and they could hear sounds that seemed to come from very far away. We need to hurry, Jai-Yun said, checking her instruments. The readings were now higher than ever before. The barrier is about to break. They carried their equipment to the beach. Following the old book's instructions, they set up Jai-Yun's machines in a large circle. He-Jin placed special lights between the machines, creating the pattern she had learned from studying sea creatures. The water began to glow brighter and brighter. The Guardian was coming. But this time, instead of rising from the water, it appeared as a giant circle of light above their heads. The circle spun slowly, creating a window between worlds. Through it, they could see strange and beautiful things from the other side. Now, Du-Hyun said firmly, we need to start now. He-Jin turned on her special lights, making them pulse in the patterns she had discovered. Jadian activated her machines, which began to hum and glow. Du-Hyun read the ancient words from his family's book, speaking them clearly and carefully. The Guardian's light grew stronger, connecting with their circle of machines. Energy flowed between the devices, creating a net of light that reached up toward the window between worlds. But something was still missing. It's not strong enough, Jai-Yun shouted over the noise of the machines. The barrier needs more power. He-Jin looked at her research notes one last time. Then she understood what they had to do. We need to add our own energy, she said. The old ceremony worked because people believed in it. We need to believe in our science just as strongly. The three friends joined hands, completing the circle. As they did, they felt energy flowing through them. He-Jin's understanding of sea life and light, Jai-Yun's knowledge of energy and measurement, and Du-Hyun's connection to the island's history. All of it combined with the Guardian's power. The net of light grew stronger, reaching higher. The window between worlds began to close slowly. They were doing it. The new ceremony was working, but they could all feel that something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would change everything. The energy flowing through He-Jin, Jai-Yun, and Du-Hyun grew stronger. Their circle of machines glowed brighter than ever, sending beams of light up toward the window between worlds. The Guardian's power joined with their science, creating something entirely new. Suddenly, everything changed. The window between worlds didn't just close. It transformed. Instead of disappearing, it became a pattern of mathematical equations floating in the air. These equations described exactly how the two worlds stayed separate, but also how they could safely connect. Look at the water, Du-Hyun called out. The ocean around the island was changing too. The blue-green light wasn't just on the surface anymore. It had become part of the water itself, like a new law of nature. He-Jin understood first. The barrier isn't just fixed, she said with wonder in her voice. It's become part of science itself. The Guardian has found a way to make the barrier work with the modern world. The Guardian's light moved down from the sky, surrounding them. In their minds, they heard its thoughts one last time. You have done more than save the barrier. You have helped it evolve. Now it will grow stronger as human knowledge grows. Jai-Yun checked her equipment. The readings had changed completely. The energy isn't just magical anymore, she said. It's following scientific laws we can understand. We can study it, measure it, and help it stay strong. The Guardian's light focused on He-Jin. Your understanding of light and life has opened a new path, it told her. You must become the first human guardian. Your science will help protect both worlds. He-Jin felt something change inside her. She could suddenly understand all the patterns of light and energy around the island. She could see how the barrier worked, like reading a familiar book. "What does this mean?" she asked, although she was beginning to understand. "It means the island will be your responsibility now," Do-hyun said, smiling. "Just like my family has always helped protect this place, now you will too. But you'll do it with science instead of ancient ceremonies." Jae-hyun's equipment showed that everything had settled into a new pattern. "We should make this area a special research stone," she suggested. "That way, the Jinn can study the barrier properly, and we can make sure it stays strong." The Guardian's light began to fade, but not because it was weak. It was becoming part of the natural world around them. The barrier would now maintain itself through the laws of science, growing stronger as humans learned more about their world. Jin looked at her friends, then at the changed island around them. "I never thought my research would lead to something like this," she said. "But it makes sense. Science is really just another way of understanding the magic that's always been in our world." As the sun rose on a new day, the three friends walked back to Do-hyun's house. The island looked the same as always, but they could all feel that it was different now. The barrier between worlds had become something new, not just magic, not just science, but both working together. Jin knew her work was just beginning. As the new guardian, she would need to learn how to protect both the barrier and the knowledge of its existence. But with Jae-hyun's help and Do-hyun's guidance, she felt ready for the task. After all, the greatest discoveries in science often happened when people were brave enough to believe in impossible things.